down. All right. Guys, welcome everybody. Been a bit too long.
Yes.
If we get up to what I want to get up to today, the first part's more technical, and then we'll get up to some more juicy stuff. We say generally Talmud is divided into two categories. There's technical halachic discourse back and forth, and then there's the Agadah portions, which are more drushes, homiletical interpretations, sometimes historical anecdotes, stories, personal incidences, those kinds of things. And there's some people like one more than the other. There are different sections, but hopefully today we're going to cover a little bit of both. And shalom aleichem to those who have been away. And where are we? We are on 200 in the Steinsatz. Do you know, if you look at the front cover, by the way, so you see it's commentary by who? Rabbi Adin, Evan Israel, Steinsatz. What's his name? Evan Israel, Steinsatz, which one is it?
You can have multiple names.
Okay, that's true. Mario, what? Supposedly, what's the other name?
Oh, I don't have a middle name.
No, they're both his last name. Evan Israel and Steinsatz are both two last names.
Oh.
Yeah, two first names we've seen, but two last names.
Is the mom and the dad?
No. It's a strange story. I just watched the video a few days ago. I watched it many times. But he was a very close chassid of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And I think this is in the 80s, late 80s. He was going by every Sunday. People would come to go and get dollars, right, for tzedakah. And the Rebbe gave him $1, and I think he brought the Rebbe one of his most recent books. And the Rebbe gave him a blessing, and then he walked away, and then the Rebbe was giving his wife a blessing, and then he called him back. Boy Steinsatz. They brought him back. And the Rebbe said, it's interesting how the Rebbe said it. It's not my business to mix into your personal affairs. However, I'm just making a suggestion. If you don't want to take it, you don't have to take it. But I'm making a suggestion that maybe you should change your name from Steinsatz, from Yiddish, to a Hebrew word. And the Rebbe said, a suggestion. It's very common for a lot of people to have last names like Ibn. It was more common in medieval times. Ibn Tabin, Ibn Ezra. Yeah. So I'm suggesting that the Stein, what does Stein mean? Stein is a rock. Salz is salt. Somewhere in his family, they must have been dealing with salt, rock mining. So I'm suggesting Stein can become Ben or Ibn, and Salz can be Melech. Melech is salt in Hebrew. And that was the whole thing. He was like totally blown away. Like,
where did this come from?
Where did this come from? Like, what the heck? Like, first of all, like, when was the last time the Rebbe told someone, I think your name should be a different name? So when a tzaddik says, I'm just making a suggestion, you don't have to listen, it's up to you.
That's law.
You know that like something is going on. So the first thing he did when he got back to Israel was he legally changed his name. I'm not sure the story why he changed to Evan Israel, because the Rebbe had suggested Ibn Melech or something. I don't know the story. There's probably a story to that. It could be he said the story, I forgot. But he changed legally to Evan Israel, and he changed his whole family to Evan Israel, except, I believe, for one daughter who was married at the time, anyhow, so she had a different last name. Another piece of the story, though, gets even more interesting, is, I don't recall if it's in that encounter itself or a later encounter. At that time, one of his sons was not so well. I know the son. I know who it is. He's fine now. He works in printing this. And could be the Rebbe mentioned that maybe changing a name would also help his health.
His what?
His health. And another time, sometime later when he came back, another encounter, the Rebbe asked him, did you change your name? He said, yes. And asked him, did you change your whole family's name? Yes. Your son's name also? Yes. How is he? Baruch Hashem, he's doing a lot better. So, anyhow, he had the name Evan Israel. He also had the name Steinsatz because that's what he was commonly known. So he always used both, as you can see. But that's like a,
The Rebbe, why didn't you say that?
huh?
You don't have the Rebbe, why didn't you say that? Can you tell me why? Ruach HaKodesh.
So
You
this
just follow
is-
orders.
Right. Well, and what we talked about that one time, there are people, there was a Rebbe who was on a level that he just knew
He saw things.
things.
He saw
Knew
things.
the answers to things, whether you knew it or believed it or not.
Yeah, trust me, I wouldn't argue, but
Right.
I would be curious to know why.
Yeah, it could be other. It could be had other inquired further about this. I'm not sure. Not that I'm aware of. Okay, so we are third last paragraph on 200. We're still on page 2B. Maybe going to page 3A today. And now we are discussing about the other law of the Mishnah. The Mishnah spoke about the walled cities. The walled cities celebrate Purim on the 15th of the month. The unwalled cities in the 14th of the month. And we've gone into great depth about where we know this from, how do we know, 14, 15, having other villages. Okay. Now we need to get to a definition. What is a walled city? So the Mishnah said that a walled city is walled from the times of Joshua. In other words, the Jews first entered into Israel. Okay. Why? Why is that the categorization of a walled city? So one of the famous explanations is that if we would label a walled city as one that is walled during the times of the Purim story, which is after the destruction of the temple, when Jerusalem was in ruins and the Jews were in exile, and they used to have walled cities when they were a sovereignty, when they were a melucha, when they were a kingdom in Israel, but now everything's been destroyed. If you would, establishing a walled city as one at that time would be like a pouring salt in the wound, reminding the Jews, hey, you used to have walled cities, but those cities are not walled anymore because you've been destroyed. Not a very nice reminder. So a better time for us to remember is when we had our own walled cities because of our strength and sovereignty in the land of Israel, and that's how we categorized it. That is one explanation. Another explanation is that even though the Purim story in particular was the war against Haman and Achashverosh, but Haman comes from a long legacy of who? Of Amalek. So this is a nation that's been trying to fight war against the Jews for many, many centuries. Who began the original war against Amalek, the grandfather? It was in the times of Moshe, but he appoints Yehoshua as the general. So Yeshua begins the battle against Amalek. So it's honoring Yeshua by beginning the original battle against this nation as defining the cities that were walled from his time. Okay? That is our Mishnah's opinion. However, the Gemara says, Mas listen, I'm on the fourth last paragraph. Must listen to Lohiki Haitana. Our Mishnah disagrees with the following Tana. Remember, the Tana is a name of a sage of the Mishnah. The name of the sage of a Talmud is called the Amora. It's the era of the Tanaim, and their teachings became the Mishnah or the Brisa, and that ended around the 2nd century. And after that period was the era of the Amoraim, the times of the Talmud. So, our Mishnah disagrees with the following Tana. The Tana we learned in the Brisa, Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha Omer, Rabbi Yeshua, the son of Karcha. It's a strange name, Karcha. In Hebrew, Karach means Kerach, Kireach, bold. Bold. Rabbi Yeshua the Baldy, or the son of the Baldy. Right? That's how they refer to people. There are a lot of Yeshuas. Yeshua the Baldy. So what did he say? He says, the cities that are walled since the days of Achashverosh in the Purim story, they read on the 15th. Different opinion. He argues. We go by the time of the Purim story. So we have two opinions. Now, our Mishnah's opinion, which is in the Mishnah does not record an argument. The Mishnah says, remember, it's a stam Mishnah, it's an anonymous Mishnah. Every ruling there is the halacha. So the law is like our Mishnah that it's walled to the times of Yeshua, but there is a dissenting opinion. And I guess we need to figure out is why. What's the basis for the different opinions?
But
especially.
But in the Mishnah, it said during the times of Yeshua, because we didn't read that. I thought we just said any walled city. When did it say in the times of Yeshua?
Go back to the Mishnah, page 195.
Let me see. Days of Yeshua.
All right.
Sorry, my bad.
So now the Gemara is going to analyze the two opinions. My time of the Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. What's the reason the Rabbi Shua ben Karcha says that it applies only the walled cities from the times of Achashverosh? He says a simple answer, logical answer. Ki Shushan, like Shushan. The center of the miracle was around Shushan. Shushan being the capital of Persia. That's where Achashverosh lived. That's where Haman lived. That's where Mordechai and Esther lived. That's where the whole party took place. That's the scene of the whole Megillah. Now, it's true, Achashverosh was the king from India to where? To Africa, as we saw the map last week. And it's true, the threat and those in danger were Jews living across the three continents. But the center scene of the whole story was in Shushan. So it makes sense to follow Shushan. Just like Shushan is a walled city during the times of Achashverosh. And I guess it's unknown. Was Shushan walled earlier than that? We don't know. Or we don't need to know. Because we're celebrating this miracle. Well, this miracle happened during this time when it was in a walled city in Shushan. So to compare the laws, therefore, and how to celebrate Purim to the same situation back then, any city that's walled from the same time of Shushan, the miracle of Shushan, in the times of Achashverosh, should also read on the 15th, which seems to be a pretty logical reason. True, I told you earlier some more, imaginative reasons, honoring Yeshua for pursuing the war against the grandfather Amalek, honoring Israel by recalling its time of sovereignty, not its time of distraction. Okay, that's a way to explain the Mishnah's opinion. But Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha's opinion seems to be very logical. Right? So therefore the Gemara is going to ask. The Tana did on my time. So what if Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha's reason seems to be pretty logical? Then what's the reason for our mission? Now ignore the reasons that I gave you. Then I brought down in the Gemara. That one's in the Yerushalmi. They're commentaries. But the Gemara gives like its core reason. What's the reason of our Mishnah that seems to say something less logical, less reasonable, that we're going to go all the way back to the times of Yeshua? So the Gemara says something interesting. Have you ever heard of something called the Gzeira Shava? You have. Where have you heard of it from? You have a
That's
siddur?
not Rabbi Shmuel Omer.
Rabbi Shmuel says that we say before davening, and the Torah could be interpreted into 13 methods of interpretation. What's the first one?
2 words.
Kal v'chomer. What's the second one? Gzeira Shava. What does Gzeira Shava mean? Verbal analogy. Meaning, right, remember, the Torah is written in a code. We, the average lay person, approaches the Torah, original Torah text, you're not going to know that. You're not going to know how to put on tefillin, how to keep Shabbos, how to eat kosher, how to slaughter an animal, how to do anything. It's all code. But if you know the rules of methodology, how to interpret, you'll figure it out, which is what the rabbis knew. So one of the principles is Gzeira Shava. Gzeira Shava means verbal analogy, meaning you have a word here, and you have the same or similar word there. And over here, you know something about it, or you know a detail. Well, you can apply that detail to that over there as well. Right? There are some famous examples. Remember, there was a story in the Gemara. Maybe you remember the story in Psachim, where there was a whole crisis. What was the crisis? That the 14th of Nisan was falling out on Shabbat. The first Seder was Saturday night. Now, what do you do? Back in the day, times of the temple, what did you do before the first Seder? You had to slaughter your animal. Okay, the Karban Pesach in the afternoon, and then grill it, and then eat it at nighttime. But here it's Shabbat. Are you allowed to slaughter the animal on Shabbat? So you're going to tell me, well, always Shabbat they were slaughtering animals in the temple. True. Which animals? animals that were sacrifices for that day. For example, there was a carbon tamid, a daily sacrifice in the morning and the afternoon, every single day of the week, which is the morning and afternoon prayers that we make today. That was the Shabbat sacrifice. There was another sacrifice called the carbon musaf, an additional sacrifice. Those were Shabbat sacrifices. Shabbat sacrifices you could do on Shabbat. The fire was always burning. But this carbon Pesach is for when? When are you going to consume it? What's it really for? It's for Saturday night. Can you slaughter on Shabbat a sacrifice for Saturday night? So all of a sudden there was a huge thing in shul one day and no one knew what to do and it was a crisis. Everyone was going crazy. What's the law? Now, it's a pretty strange story because even though it does not happen every single year, but when's the last time Erev Pesach fell out on Shabbos? This past year, right? Remember Shabbos morning, just sort of flushing down the chametz down the toilet or whatever. And when did it happen before that? We had early davening, 8 a.m., finished the chametz beforehand. Complicated. And when did it happen before that? It happened, I remember, 8 years before that or something, 7 years, whatever, it happens at least once or twice a decade, generally. So I don't understand. No one's around since last time it happened. What did we do last time? It's not a new thing, the first time ever in the history of the world. Okay, whatever reason, I don't know, it's not clear. So Hillel came along. Hillel said, I have an answer. I'm going to answer based on a Gzera Shava. It says about the Pesach, it says you should slaughter the Pesach offering b'mo'ado, which means in its time. And it says in another pasuk, I've forgotten where, about another matter of festival, b'mo'ado, in its time. And about that other b'mo'ado, I know it includes even on Shabbat. So too, when it comes to Pesach, since I know that b'mo'ado means even Shabbat, therefore this b'mo'ado will also mean Shabbat. He made a Gzera Shava between that word and this word, same words, and applied the law from one place to another place.
And that calmed everybody down?
Pretty
Everybody
much.
agreed?
Pretty much. Yeah. Now, just to be clear about Gzera Shava, because it's an interesting methodology, it's an interesting principle. It differs to some other principles. Other principles, for example, the Kal V'chomer. You know what the Kal V'chomer principle is? Kal V'chomer is... who can give an example of a Kal V'chomer?
A larger thing.
If you, who are only 5'1", can reach the ring and this court and slam dunk, how much more so? I'm 6'3", I can for sure slam dunk. I'm not sure if it's a good Kal V'chomer because maybe the 5'1" can jump really high, the 6'3" can't jump at all. I don't know how tall the ring is, but that idea. You take a Kal and Chomer. Kal is a lighter, softer, smaller. Chomer is a heavier, larger. And you say if it applies to the smaller, if it short applies to the larger, right?
I think there's English terms for yours.
A fortiori.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the fancy term. Correct. We have one Hillel student over here who knows something.
That's above my pay grade.
Now, Kal V'chomer, you can apply Kal V'chomers from human logic. A person can, one of the sages can approach the Torah and apply their own Kal V'chomer. Gzera Shava, you can't make up your own Gzera Shavas. You can't stop playing around and saying, well, I have this word here, this word there, this one's unclear, I'm going to play around. No. What's unique about the Gzera Shava is that it was a principle which you had to have received from your teacher, from his teacher, from his teacher, all the way back to Halacha L'Moshe Misinai, all the way back to Sinai. Gzera Shava has to be something given by Hashem to Moshe at Sinai.
And Hillel figured that out.
Now, evidently, Hillel received from his teacher, received from his teacher. Yeah. Others did not receive. So very often, as you're about to see now, Gemara, one person suggests a Kal V'chomer. If you're suggesting it, it's because you've received it from somewhere. You're not making it up. Another person does not agree with the Kal V'chomer simply because they never received it. So it's almost an argument now. Is it truly a received tradition or not? That's the question. Okay? So, we're asking, why does Al Tana learn that? Why does Al Mishnah learn that you applied the walled city to the times of Yeshua? So the Gemara says, Yalif Prazi. We're going to make a verbal analogy between the two words of prazi and prazi. What's prazi in our context? Who remembers prazi? Al-Kain, Hayudim, Prazim. The prazi means what? We said the scattered, the unwalled, the open cities. So we said that the unwalled cities keep Purim on the which date?
14th.
14th. So in our Megillah it says, okay, now Yehudim have Prazim. Okay, therefore the Jews who have Prazim keep on the 14th. And it says there in the book of Devarim, and Moshe Rabbeinu was talking to the Jews and reviewing with them their journeys in the desert and preparing them to go into into Israel. Moshe says, Levad me'aria prazi harbe me'yot, that in your battles conquering many towns, he says, besides for the unwalled cities, there were a great many. Moshe is talking about their conquering of walled cities, unwalled cities, etc. Now, when Moshe is talking about a walled city or unwalled city, what's he referring to? Walled and unwalled in the times of who? Times of Shushan, Achashverosh, himself. Or the Gemara is going to say Yeshua, really because him and Yeshua will live at the same time. And also, this is Moshe sort of preparing them about entering into Israel, which Yeshua will take over. So since the Prazi in the Torah with Moshe is certainly referring to walled and unwalled in the times of Moshe and Yeshua, therefore, when it comes to the Prazi in the Megillah about the unwalled cities, when they read the Megillah, we're going to say, we don't know how to interpret it, but let's rely on the other word and say here too, it also, Afkan, here also, we're talking about walled cities from the times of Yeshua bin Nun.
Wait, that last thing on how you connected the two.
With Prazi. By us, we says that the Prazi cities read on the 14th. The unwalled cities. What kind of unwalled cities? Unwalled during the times of Shushan, unwalled during the times of, in other words, a city that was walled during the times of Yeshua, but later, during the times of the Purim story, was unwalled. Right? That's the difference. Is that considered a walled city or an unwalled city? According to our Mishnah, it's an unwalled city. According to Rabbi Shua ben Karcha, it's a walled city.
You mean the unwalled?
Sorry.
No,
Other way around. It was unwalled, correct. Unwalled in the times of Yeshua, but walled later during the times of Purim. According to our Mishnah, it's an unwalled city. According to Rabbi Shua ben Karcha, it's a walled city. So our Mishnah says, but we're learning Prazi. Prazi in the Torah means the walled or unwalled, defined by during the times of Yeshua. Therefore, when it comes to the word Prazi in the Megillah, I'll apply the same definition that the walled or unwalled is defined by if it's walled or unwalled from the times of Yeshua. Yes?
Is it exact Shava or a concern that you have your rabbi teach it to you?
Zer Shava.
That's exact Shava?
Tradition.
Oh, you don't need that.
No. There's a discussion about it, but for sure, Zer Shava. Okay, so now we have a pretty substantive source for our Mishnah that it applies to a walled city during the times of Yeshua. So now the question falls back on Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. From where do you know to say that walled and unwalled is defined by during the times of Shushan? What do you mean? We have Xer Shava, Prazi. Okay, so the Gemara says, I can actually, it's very simple to explain why Rabbi Shua ben Karcha did not interpret like our Mishnah. And he decided that a walled city is the reasonable explanation, Kishushan, like Shushan, whatever's walled during the times of the miracle. Why does he say that? The lastly, Prazi. He doesn't hold of this Zer Shava. He never received it. He says no such thing. It's a made-up thing. It didn't come from Moses and Sinai. I disagree with the Zer Shava. Okay, so therefore, what does walled unwalled mean in the Megillah? Like you would assume it to mean times of Purim. But why does our Tana, who teaches that it's walled and unwalled from times of Yeshua, why does he not agree with Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha?
Isn't that a little? I don't know if it's arrogant, but if I don't know it, if I didn't get it from my Rebbe, that it doesn't exist. Is that true?
It could be a good question. It could be he walked around the room in the basement measure. He said, "You ever heard of this? No. You ever heard of this? No. Nobody ever heard of it. Could be."
What is the word Tana?
Tana means teacher, but more specifically, it refers to a sage in the times of the Mishnah. The sage up until the 2nd century. That's the era of Tanaim. about the 2nd century before the Common Era, the 2nd century after the Common Era. Those 300-400 years are the era of Tanaim. 3rd till 6th century is the era of the Amoraim, which is like Aramaic for teacher also, from the word emor, to say, the teachers also. Now, by the way, are you following this question? Strange. We just said that the reason of our explanation of our Mishnah is because he holds of Prazi, the Gzera Shava. So why is Rabbi Yeshua not learn like him? He doesn't hold the Gzera Shava. Okay. And why does our Tana? Now the question is, and why does our Tana not learn like Rabbi Yeshua?
Go back to present.
What kind of question is that? We just explained why he has Prazi, right? So that's what the Gemara says. My timer, you're asking what's the reason why our Tana in our Mishnah does not agree with Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha? What do you mean why? Da isle Prazi. He has Gzera Shava, he just told you. He has the verbal analogy to explain why we define it as walled during the times of Yeshua. So the Gemara explains, no, this is what I mean. We know that he has that. But our Tana runs into a problem. Ela Shushan of the command. If you interpret, according to our Mishnah, that walled and unwalled is defined by the times of Yeshua ben Nun. If you were walled during the times of Yeshua, you'd be the 15th. If you were unwalled, you'd be the 14th. There's one huge elephant in the room. Shushan. When does Shushan read? 15th. What's Shushan's category according to our Mishnah, according to our time?
It's unwalled.
It's unwalled city. During the times of Yeshua. It only became walled later. So your whole Shushan doesn't fit in anywhere. It's an unwalled city, and its celebration, according to the Megillah, is on the 15th. Like a prazim, but like a makafin. It's not an unwalled city. It's not like the unwalled cities because it reads on the 15th. And it's not like the walled cities because it's not a walled city. So I understand the explanation of our Tana's ruling that he learns from the Torah, Prazi as a source for it. Very nice. But you got a big problem. How do you explain Shushan?
Well, the miracle took place in Shushan.
Oh, Amar Rabba, Varmila Kadi. Rava says, or some say it's Kadi that says, who's Kadi? Kadi was the name of a sage. Maybe a name, or maybe a pseudonym. Kadi may mean like the word kad. Kad means a barrel, like an empty barrel. Kadi, an empty name, like a anonymous. Someone didn't want to be named. Or we forgot his name. We forgot where the teacher came from. And they answer, Shani, Shushan. Shushan is an exception, because the miracle happened there. Therefore, how does that answer the question?
Then it's not a contradiction.
Shushan is not a walled city, but it still observes on the 15th. Because why?
Because it has the distinction of being the one where the miracle took place.
So there's two ways to explain this answer. One way to understand this answer is that it's indeed not a walled city, but the fact is, its war happened till a day later. They were continuing to fight on the 14th, and therefore they only rested on the 15th. So technically, the miracle happened differently over there. It's true it does not fit into the general ruling of walled and unwalled, but its personal, individual circumstances were different. One way. Another explanation is, even though it's not a walled city, since it was the seat of the whole miracle, it has a prestige to be considered like a walled city. Shushan is the only unwalled city in the world that we're considering to be a walled city. It gets like the prominence of a walled city. Capital, where it all happened. Yeah.
It was walled at the time.
It was walled at the time of Achashverosh, but not at the times of Yeshua.
So third, and maybe one of I can't tell, is that it was, miracle happened in Shushan. Shushan was a prestigious city. What's prestigious about it? It had a wall around it at that time. And we're going to extend that prestige to other cities in the world that have that wall. But the timing of it is going to be at the time of Yeshua. I'm not sure if that fits into
So I thought it was a miracle that.
What about another city that was walled during the times of Achashverosh? When should they keep Purim?
Because the miracle happened in Shushan. Shushan is the 15th. We're going to extend that to other big cities. What's the definition of a big city? Big city is an important city. Important city is one that was walled during the time of Yeshua.
Good, even though Yeshua was not one of those. Even though Shushan was not one of those.
Right, because it's the prestige city.
Oh,
It's defining the prestige city, nothing to do with walls.
what makes another city prestigious is that it's walled from times of Yeshua. What makes Shushan prestigious
No,
is that the miracle happened there.
No, because it had a wall around it, so it was a prestigious city. So Shushan gets 15th, and it's a prestigious city. We want to extend it to other prestigious cities in honor of Shushan, however. But the timing of it has to be Yeshua ben Nun.
Okay, good. It's probably somewhere. It's in the words here. Probably fit into one of the commentaries. Yes.
One of them more
Huh?
One of them more
Add it to the side here. This empty space for a reason. Okay. So now we figured out that we have two interpretations of what a walled city means. Our Mish's interpretation, it means times of Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua's reasoning is that it's not walled from the times of Yeshua, but walled from the times of Achashverosh. Okay, and we've explained the source for each reason and why each one does not agree with the other. Okay, now the Gemara is going to make a technical challenge to Rabbi Yeshua's opinion, and I'm going to first show you, to remind you, the Megillah's text. What does the Megillah say? Chapter 9. Let's see if I can read it backwards on my screen. I can't. Who's going to read it for us?
28 and these days shall be remembered and celebrated throughout every generation, in every family, every province, and every city. And the days of Purim shall not be revoked from the amidst.
Can't read you that right finger. The right finger.
Amidst the Jews, and their memory shall not cease from their seed. Excellent. That's the pasuk. Now, you all know why I highlighted the words remembered and celebrated, right? Because that was last time we discussed that. Remember that? Who remembers that?
Refresh our memories.
Hayamim Eileh Niskarim V'Nasim. These days are remembered and performed. Because performed is the mitzvahs and remembered is the Megillah. And then we learned the Megillah is the same day as that mitzvahs. Okay, fine. We're not getting into that now.
Okay.
But I've bolded also other two things. Every province and every city. In the Hebrew. Who remembers the Hebrew? Who's a Megillah reader? What did the Hebrew say? B'chol medina o medina o b'chol ir va'ir. So the truth is, this is actually a very lousy or non-literal translation. Because here it says every province. But b'chol medina o medina, double expression, would literally mean every province and every province. B'chol ir va'ir, every city and every city. Okay? Which, right away, that's a strange way to put things. Why you're repeating it twice? And that's the discussion over here. Why do you have Medina or Medina, city, province and province, and then Ir va'ir, city and city? So let's see. Who does this language work according to? The Tana of Al Mishnah and its definition of walled city, or Rabbi Shua ben Karcha's definition of walled city? Well, look at the Gemara inside. You don't have to guess. The Gemara is going to help you.
Got a 50-50 chance.
Bishlem Tana Didan, all fits in well according to our Tana that defines the distinction. The definition is walled city of times of Yeshua. Hainu Dichsiv. That's why the pasuk repeats itself. Medina or Medina ve'ir ve'ir, because we have a lot of distinctions to make over here. Number one, Medina or Medina, the double expression of every province is lechalek bein makafin chema mes Yeshua ben Nun lemakafin chema mes Achashverosh. To tell you that there is a difference in a walled city from times of Yeshua and a walled city from the Achashverosh. A walled city times of Yeshua ben Nun would be the 15th, and a walled city during the times of Achashverosh would be the 14th. That's one important distinction. Ir va'ir, every city and every city is another important distinction. Lechalek bein Shushan l'shayir rayos, to distinguish between Shushan and other unwalled cities. Because Shushan's an exception, remember. It's not a walled city, according to our Mishnah's criteria, but it's still keeping on the 15th. In other words, according to our Mishnah, there's 3 categories of cities, not 2 categories, 3 categories. Walled cities, 15, times of Yeshua. Unwalled cities, times of Yeshua, even if it's walled later, 14. And what's category number 3? Shushan. Unwalled city, by 15. So Medina or Medina is between the walled and the unwalled cities, but there's an exception. So Ir va'ir is between most unwalled cities and Shushan being the exception.
So the reason for the double expression is to separate Shushan? Is that what you, is that
The
what
reason
you're
for the
saying?
second double expression. The first double expression is to lay down the basic principle between walled and unwalled cities from the times of Yeshua. And the second double expression is to tell you, even in the unwalled cities during the times of Yeshua, even if they are walled today, who cares? It's still the 14th. There's one exception, that's Shushan.
How does Medina refer to walled cities versus unwalled cities? When we're talking about provinces.
He's saying Medina is more like a country.
Yeah.
Why does it say ear to ear to ear to ear? Then it'll be confusing.
Oh, we're not confused now.
So I think maybe Medina is being sort of used a little looser than we would normally think of it. Medina normally think of it as a state and a country, but I think of Medina also in a more looser way is a region or a prominent city.
A who?
A prominent city.
Oh, prominent.
Think of Medina, if you think of the contrast, Medina versus Ir. So generally you'd say Medina being a country and Ir being a state or a city, right? There's USA, Florida, Miami, Ojas, right? So look at the contrast, Medina versus Ir. You could also say Medina, prominent, walled city. Ir, unwalled city. That contrast, Medina is definitely something more glamorous than an Ir. So in this context, Medina would be the area that has its own unique set of laws. What is that? Walled cities versus Ir, cities, unwalled cities. So Medina makes a distinction between this walled city and that walled city. This walled city from the times of Yeshua ben Nun, 50. This walled city from the times of Achashverosh, 14. And then Ir va'ir are unwalled cities. All unwalled cities from the times of Yeshua ben Nun generally are when? 14. Except for this one Ir, there's one unwalled city from the times of Yeshua ben Nun. That's an exception. Which one is that? So according to our Tana, we can figure it out. However, according to Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, but according to Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, there's only one distinction. Either you're walled during the times of Achashverosh, or you're not. There's no exceptions. Shush is not an exception. Shush is the rule. According to Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha.
Right.
That's the rule. Like Shushan, walled during Achashverosh's times, 15.
Now, how does he explain the 2 double expressions?
That's the Gemara's question. According to Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, Bishleim Medina, Medina, it all fits in well when I have Medina or Medina, Lechalek to divide, between Shushan and Sha'arais, between Shushan, i.e. walled cities, versus other cities, unwalled cities. One distinction. Elo Ir va'ir, but another double expression, L'mayasa, what's the point of it? There's no additional distinction in Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha's opinion. Yeah.
Wait, so according to Yeshua ben Karcha, he would say that, let's say there was a city at the time of Yeshua, and then by the time Shushan came around, it was destroyed. The gate around it was destroyed, and it had no wall.
It would be the...
He wouldn't consider that one of those cities?
Absolutely not.
So it's the third.
Huh?
If there are 3 opinions, one would say that it's from that time, if it were around at the time of Yeshua. And then there's one that would say at the time of Shushan. And then one would say that even from the time of, so it's only 2 or
2 opinions. 2 opinions.
Only 2?
But the question, according to Rabbi Shua ben Karach, is why the two different repetitious expressions in the pasuk? Unnecessary. So what does he answer you? Amalacha Rabbi Shua ben Karach will answer you. And by the way, just to remind you, Rabbi Shua ben Karach would never receive this question and never gave this answer. This is we who are talking on his behalf. As if to say, let's discuss American history. Why did President Lincoln say this and do that? And you're going to answer, I think he did that because, right? He didn't say this, he didn't know this, right? But we're fitting it in. He's going to answer to you, hold on a minute. You just told me that the mission, that the pasuk works out well without Tana, and it's only a question on him? No. All the time, you think it even makes sense according to the Tana of our Mishnah? Also not. You know why? You should have picked up on this. We just said, Medina, Ir v'ir. Medina, separates between the walled cities of Yeshua bin Nun versus the walled cities during Shushan. And then Ir v'ir, but 1 second. Where did our Tana, our Mishnah tell us? What's their source for knowing that the definition of a walled city is during the times of Yeshua? What was their source?
It's said in the Mishnah.
What was their reason? The Gzeira Shava. The Prazi from the Torah. So Medina is needed for that? No. How can you tell me that according to our Tana, the double expression makes sense twice? Medina is the source for the distinction between the walled cities back then and the walled cities today. And if Medina is not the source for that, they have a source going all the way back to the Torah, the Prazi, as we mentioned. See, even according to our Tana, Medina, the Ir is also unnecessary. Because that which you try to learn out from Medina is not true. They know that already from Prazi, from the Gzeira Shava. By the way, off topic, not to throw a wrench in this over here, but there are those that this Gzeira Shava is a bit of a, not a simple matter. This one in particular, because look what it's doing. It's drawing a Gzeira Shava between a word from the Torah, Chamish Chumshei Torah, from the book of Devarim, and a word of the Megillah, which is the word of the prophets or scriptures. Or whoever said you could do that. You know, in the 5 books of Moses, we have a principle called Gzeira Shava. But can you use Gzeira Shava to do a verbal analogy between a word from the 5 books of Moses and a word from the book of scripture? It's not a simple matter. Huh?
Maybe that's the reason why they bring the second one.
Okay. That's not what the Gemara answers, but that's an interesting point.
Actually, it's a pretty strong argument. Like, how could it have been from the Sinai for Muslim?
How can you even make a Gzeira Shava? I mean, if you say that God's the author of the 5 books of Moses and there's the same code in all 5 books, I get it. But how can God have intended a code for a word, one word in the Torah to a word that later is going to be authored by Mordechai and Esther?
And it would have to have been taught down by the rabbi and the student all those generations before.
And before the Megillah was even written, he's already passing down the Gzeira Shava of the Megillah. Now, we're not ruling it out, but it's not as simple as we originally thought.
Abraham and Jacob, all those guys had a lot of knowledge before the Torah.
They knew the Torah before it was given.
So
That is true.
same
That is true. The Torah is, on a certain level, is timeless, right? That's for sure. The Torah is, when was the Torah actually written? There's a story about that. There's a clear definition to that. But the concept, the wisdom of the Torah is timeless. In other words, the Medrash says, Alpayim Shadna Kadma Torah Le'olam. The Torah came 2,000 years before the world. Or the Zohar says, God looked at the Torah and through the Torah created the world. The Torah was the blueprint for the world. So the Torah has nothing, the Torah is God's wisdom. We received it in a formal transmission and it was transcribed. That we have a particular time in history when it happened. But if somebody could access Torah before it was transmitted to us, like some people could, they got it. It's true. But anyhow, let's see how the Gemara says this. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha counters and he says, how can you say Medina is the source for the distinction between the two different kinds of walled cities? No, it's not. Prazi and Prazi is, as we just learned earlier. Ella, rather, Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha says, you must say, not just according to me, but according to the Al Mishnah also, that Medina is the double expression is coming for a highly different drasha, a new teaching. Nothing to do with the distinction of walled and unwalled cities that we know from elsewhere. A distinction, a new teaching. What's the teaching? Very interesting teaching. Ukud Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, the teaching of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. What is his teaching? The Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi taught as follows. When we say krach, when we say a walled city, who and what and where is included in a walled city? So your simple answer would be anyone or anything within the walls. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi taught, no, not true. Krach, the walled city, v'chol hasamuch loi, anybody living in close proximity to the walled city, v'chol hanira imoi, and anybody or any location that can be seen from within the walled city. Nidon kekrach is considered like a walled city. You could be living in an unwalled city, but still keep Purim on the 15th because you're considered to be in a walled city. Why is that? So,
according to this, if I could see it in the, in the horizon, then you're considered like you're there.
oh, okay. So that we need to understand what that
I
means.
thought that's what
The parameters of this we have to get to, but let's first explain the general idea. The general idea is that you may have had a small Bedouin camp outside a walled city, right? But they may have participated in or been considered somewhat members of the walled city. How so? First of all, if there was an attack, where would they run to? Where would they get shelter from? The walled city. Maybe they would participate, maybe they pay taxes to the walled city. Maybe they would, shop and be a part of certain services of the walled city. They were, because they were right outside and they benefited from and they participated in, they contributed to as well. So therefore, if you were one of those little villages, could be a villager. We always thought that all villagers keep, 14th or earlier. No, but if you were a villager, living near a walled city, going in there a couple times a week, shopping there, paying a tax over there, participating in their affairs, then you're also considered a walled city. And we'll get into the parameters in a moment. But therefore, when the Megillah says of V'chol Medina or Medina, it's telling me there's Medina and there's Medina. There are walled cities, and there are those who don't live in walled cities but are still part of walled cities because they are, for all practical matters, somewhat members of the walled city. What is the parameter? We said anyone that lives in close proximity or that can be seen. Two things we said, right? So the Gemara asks, Ad kama, how far? Rabbi Yirmiyah says, V'temer Rabbi Chiber Abba says, K'mei Chamson leTveria, the distance from the city of Chamson to the city of Tveria. And how far is that? How far is Chamson to Tveria? The Gemara says a mil. 1 mil. How much is a mil? No, it's closer to a kilometer. A mil is 1,000 amot. An amma is 6 tfachim. 6 tfachim make 1 amma, 1,000 amos make 1 mil, 4 mil make 1 parsa. Following? Okay, so in actually brought there's a chart that I found online, but because there's many opinions. But the amma, the tefach is the handbreadth, is the fist. 6 of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 makes an amma, even though it's a very big amma, because an amma is generally considered to be from the elbow to the top of the middle finger, the tallest finger on a general hand. But I think my hand is smaller than an amma. I don't know, something's wrong with me then. Okay? And an amma can be about between 47 to 53 centimeters, approximately half a meter. And 2,000 amos makes a mil close to a kilometer.
So the width of the Kinneret is less than a kilometer?
Why is it Kinneret?
Because in the map here is Tiberias and here is Hama.
But where's the Kinneret over here? No, the Kinneret's far on the east coast, right?
No,
Tiberias is on
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Is that, you saying that shaded area is the Kinneret?
Yeah.
Did you
Um,
picture color?
Yeah.
they got the deluxe.
Oh, man.
Oh, man.
Bigger.
Bigger is color, small is black and white. Okay, so yeah, I don't know if this is drawn to size because, yeah, I mean, 1 kilometer is not very far.
no.
But anyhow, so the definition of being, when the Gemara asked Ad Kama, how far, is it asking, huh?
It's here, yeah, I'm gonna measure this.
And what's the, is there a modern day city called Khamtan today?
This is Hama.
Hamad Geder, yeah.
It's
Oh, you know about it?
I've been there.
Oh, you've been there. What's there?
It's like,
Amazing. You're at the place that the Gemara defined as the measurement of a mil way out of Tveria. You could have reviewed the whole laws of Purim. You could have all relevant.
It's on the lake, it's on
we went hiking there. I don't remember.
It's good hikes over there.
It says Tiberia is different.
So from that spot to that spot, it says 22 kilometers.
Okay, it says Tiberia.
By the way, you should know.
It says Tiberia is different. Ancient.
Oh yeah. There are. It says it over here. Modern day Tveria, and the Talmud's Tveria are not the same location. Old city Tveria is in a different place. Now I don't know if that counts for the 22 kilometers. That's a big.
Tiberia goes south of modern day Tiberia.
Ancient Tveria is south.
The
So that
distance between ancient Tiberia and Hamtan was approximately 1,000 to 1,200.
okay. All right. So therefore, we asked the question, how much? And we said from the distance of Chamsan to Tveria, which is 1 mil. Now the Gemara asks, why do you have to give a measurement in a very strange way? The distance of Chamsan to Tveria, and then you have to tell me, oh, by the way, it's a mil. But let him a mil. Just say a mil. Just give the factual answer. 1 mil is the measurement. So the Gemara says, no. Hakom Ashbalon. The shiur the mil kamahava Chamsan to Tveria. Actually, this discussion and this law is the source of us knowing the definition of a mil. Meaning, somehow, somewhere, how much is a mil? We know there's a measurement called a mil. How far is a mil? No idea. Well, there's a tradition that a mil is a distance from Chamson to Tveria. How far is that? Go measure. And once you go measure from Chamson to Tveria, you'll know the measurement of a mil. So Chamsan to Tveria was actually the source of knowing the distance of a mil, which ended up being 2,000 amot. 2,000 amot. 2,000 amot.
1,000 to 1,200 meters.
Which is what?
1,000 to 1,200 meters.
Yeah, about a kilometer.
Yeah. Now, just by the way, if you want to get a little deep over here, just to understand. So, okay, we're not going to start the next Gemara, but I'll give introduction to it. But first, just get a little deep over here. So, this is a pretty radical new law that you could be living outside of the walled city, but you're still part of the walled city. If what? If the Gemara says either you're close to it or you can be seen from it. There's two. And then the Gemara asks Ad Kama, how far? And the Gemara answered a mil. The question of how far is going on those living near it or those that can be seen from it. And as you said, it's possible to see on a non-cloudy day miles and miles away. So how do you understand the Gemara here?
Well, because maybe geography doesn't allow you to see.
And what about if, due to geography, I am less than a mil in actual distance, but much more than a mil if you follow the roads? For example. Good point.
Or you're on top of a mountain and the town is in a village.
Yeah.
Can that be considered
These are all good questions. So there's a lot of discussion in the Rishonim. I'm not going to get into it now, but how do I understand this Gemara? It could be everything has to be within the mill, even that which is seen. But anyhow, there's a lot of it's not clear the answers to this question. There definitely has to be something reasonable over here. If I can see the other end of the country, or who knows what, use my binoculars and see whatever. No, you're not going to see the part of a walled city, because remember the explanation was that you are somewhat a part of that city in terms of different affairs. So somebody so far away is not really part of that walled city. Off topic a little bit, but the question is asked: what about walled cities outside of Israel? Were there walled cities outside of Israel that were walled from the times of Yeshua ben Nun? Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Ancient civilizations, right? Sure. So what's the law there?
I think in Shushan now. I think so. You know,
Well, Shushan is not a good example. Shushan was not walled during the time of Yeshua ben Nun. It's an exception.
No, I know, but I'm talking about nowadays because it looks like, right?
Yeah.
I think, do they celebrate the same
In
time?
Shushan you should, 15th.
There's no Jews for
Are there Jews there? There are Jews.
Yeah, there are.
There's a chief rabbi of Iran now. You know that? There's a chief rabbi of Iran. He came
Is
to
that
the.
good?
I think it's a recent appointment.
I saw a video from Chief Rabbi Megillah.
Really?
No, there's a community. There's a community. We know that the last Jew of Afghanistan recently left Afghanistan. The last Jew there, but Iran has a community, Jewish community. I'll give you a brief teaser into next week's class because it's very interesting stuff. I'm going to show the process around so you can get a little teaser. You think you know the Aleph base. Do you recognize the letters on the left column? Pass it around.
I've seen
That's
that before.
Proto-Hebrew. It's called. There's two ksav. There's ksav Ashuri and ksav Ivri.
Oh, that's a good.
And apparently, for a lot of history, the left column was a more common language than the right column. In fact, according to many, Torah scrolls, which were main Torah scrolls used for study around different communities, were actually written in Ksav Ivri, not in Ksav Ashuri. Were written with the left-hand column, not the right-hand column.
But that's not
Most-
the Kodesh then.
It is. It's the same language, it's different letters. And the average person did not know how to read the right-hand column.
And how about
Similar to today,
the little symbols in the Torah letters?
the crowns.
Yeah, so the crowns would have been crowned in these letters?
No, it's a whole different font.
I think Isaac has a piece of art in his house.
In this font or some writing.
No,
This
not
was standard
with-
language for most
with
people.
Things with these symbols or letters, not the whole thing. A lot of it is in regular Hebrew letters, but in there, there's some of this too.
No, but hold on a second, the Torah by Hashem is in
Yes.
this letter?
Right. No, none of it.
There's three opinions in the Gemara. When Moshe received the Torah from Hashem, or the Ten Commandments. Hello? The Ten
Or
Commandments.
next or behind the diamond.
Mario, the Ten Commandments were written in which font?
I want to believe that it's in the right one.
You want to.
Not the correct, but the right one.
You want to. It may not be true.
Huh.
The Ten Commandments may be in the left font.
I thought that our Torah has been passed down, and we found you from the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah,
was
that's
in the
how it
regular
is.
thing, and that's the oldest thing we found. And where did we
So-
find anything like that?
So now you have a reason to come back next week.
Oh, these cliffhangers!
And confusion.
Always giving us a reason to come back.
Threaten me with a good time, how dare you?